Fluff your pillow and settle in. Imagine for a moment that the mattress beneath you is not just foam and springs, but a page in a very, very long book. A book that began long before humans, before mammals, before forests, even before complex cells. Tonight, as the sleepy scientist, I'm going to turn those pages softly and show you how the story written in the margins of deep time ended up living inside your skin. Cosmology Sleepy reveals evolution's incredible impact on our bodies, a gentle voyage from primordial soup to the rhythm of your breath. Picture the early Earth in the dimmest of colors, a planet still finding its voice. The sky was heavy with gases we'd now call hostile, and the seas were not the placid blue you might imagine, but a roiling, mineral-rich broth where lightning and heat and chemical chance met in endless experiments. Current evidence suggests life's first steps happened in such muddled, energetic places, small molecules joining into larger ones, and then, somehow, persisting and copying. It's tempting to frame that beginning as a single cinematic moment, but the truth is a slow chorus of fits and starts, molecules that lasted long enough to be useful, then vanished, and then the lucky combinations that stuck. If you're still awake, notice the gentle weight of your head on the pillow. That weight is a tidy consequence of a long parade of innovations, each one piling up like sediment. Some of the earliest pages of your bodily story are written in molecules that learn to hold together and to copy themselves. From those early replicators came the first true cells, tiny, simple, efficient. We call those prokaryotes, bacteria and their cousins. They were and remain masters of being small and successful. One of the great shifts in life's story is the rise of complexity. For billions of years, life was content with being small and single-celled. Then, around a very long while ago, a transformative partnership occurred. A larger cell engulfed a smaller one, and instead of digesting it, the two settled into something like a domestic arrangement. The smaller one became a power unit inside the larger, providing energy in return for shelter. We call those power units mitochondria. They are not aliens or little people living in our cells. They are descendants of once free bacteria, now deeply integrated and utterly essential. Your mitochondria are the reason your muscles can power a walk to the kettle or a climb up the stairs. They are tiny furnaces inside nearly every cell, converting oxygen and food into usable energy. When you feel warm or tired, you are feeling, in part, the work of those ancient partnerships. It's tempting to think of these events as conscious choices by molecules. They were not. Evolution is not a planner. It's a relentless process of selection and variation. But that process, patient and unintentional, built the scaffolding for complexity.
The arrival of mitochondria and other internal structures in cells, what biologists call the emergence of eukaryotic cells, opened up possibilities. Larger, compartmentalized cells could specialize, could carry out more elaborate chemistry, and, crucially, could support staying together, a first whisper of multicellularity. Slowly now, picture clusters of cells learning to cooperate. Cells can adhere to one another using sticky proteins, the molecular equivalent of Velcro. They send chemical messages back and forth, agreeing, in a very impersonal way, to divide labor. Some cells become structural, others become sensors. Some build the body's plumbing, others its wiring. What starts as a tiny communal patch of cells can become a sponge-like animal, filtering water and picking up particulate food. Sponges are still living reminders that the first steps towards complex bodies were experimental and modular rather than the work of a master craftsman. From those early multicellular experiments emerged the idea of body plans. Picture a flat disk of tissue, and then imagine adding direction, a front and a back, a left and a right. Bilateral symmetry, having matching sides, is an incredibly useful trick for animals that move purposefully through an environment. When you swim or walk, having a defined front helps you sense and process the world ahead of you. Alongside symmetry came cephalization, a concentration of sensory and neural tissues at the head end. It's a sensible arrangement. If there's a direction you habitually go, it pays to put the instruments for sensing and control at that end. And so, piece by piece, early animals evolved structures for sensing and moving, making choices at a very basic level about where to find food and where to avoid danger. Imagine a tiny creature with a primitive nerve net, a diffuse web of cells that passes along simple signals. That net can coordinate contractions, allowing a jellyfish to pulse through water. Later, as nervous tissue concentrates and bundles into cords and ganglia and then into a centralized brain, behaviors become more directed, more complex. In your own body, those long-ago decisions echo in the very architecture of your nervous system. Threads that once merely contracted and released now carry the electrical whispers that underlie thought, memory, and feeling. Slowly breathe in and feel the chest rise. That breath is enabled by innovations deep in vertebrate history. One of the most important transformations was the notochord, a flexible rod-like structure running along the back of early chordates. It provided the mechanical scaffold that allowed more efficient swimming and later more complex body movements. Over evolutionary time, segments of cartilage and bone wrapped around and replaced that notochord, forming the vertebral column, your spine.
Think of the spine as an old engineering idea, upgraded repeatedly, from a simple rod to a stacking of bony blocks with intervertebral cushions that both bear weight and protect the spinal cord, the cable of nerves that links brain to body. Across the eons, some fish developed limb-like structures. One of our favorite examples is an animal often invoked in fossil hunters' bedtime tales, Tiktaalik. It had fins with bones that show a pattern remarkably similar to the bones in our own arms and legs. That pattern, a single bone followed by two, then many, is a deep blueprint that links fin to limb. These structures didn't emerge because some fish decided to walk. Rather, variability produced fin structures that, in shallow, swampy water, were better for propping up the body or pushing along the bottom. Over time, those tinkered shapes became useful on land, and the lineage that would give rise to tetrapods, animals with 4 limbs, began exploring new niches. You right now carry the history of that exploration in your hands and feet. The precise arrangement of bones in your wrist, the alignment of tendons and muscles, the opposability of your thumb, these are the echoes of experiments with structure and use. Our hands are not perfect, they are compromise machines. The thumb gives us dexterity and tool use at the cost of vulnerability to repetitive strain. The same clever architecture that allows a potter to shape clay also makes typing for hours uncomfortable. Let's pause and place a hand over your heart. Feel it beat, a slow, steady drum that once began as simple muscular pumps in fish. Circulatory systems evolved to move oxygen, nutrients, and waste around bigger, more complex bodies. Early animals relied on diffusion, molecules simply drifting short distances, but as bodies grew thicker, diffusion was too slow. Veins, arteries, and pulsating hearts became necessary. The evolution from simple pumps to the sophisticated 4-chambered heart of birds and mammals involves a series of steps where compartments separate oxygenated and deoxygenated blood more effectively, improving the efficiency of oxygen delivery. Hemoglobin, the molecule that carries oxygen in your blood, is another ancient innovation, a metal protein tuned to pick up oxygen where it's abundant and release it where tissues need it. When you stand up and your heart ticks a little faster, you are invoking a cascade of mechanisms honed over millions of small changes. On the surface of that body, your skin is a living library. It is the interface with the world, evolved to protect, to regulate temperature, and to communicate. The outermost layer is largely keratin, the same tough protein that cousins of ours like feathers and scales use. In land-dwelling vertebrates, keratinization produces protective layers, and in the case of hair, a versatility in insulation. Sweat glands evolved as a highly effective way to lose heat through evaporative cooling, a feature especially important for animals like ours that are active during the day. Pigmentation, primarily melanin, helps guard against ultraviolet radiation. It also became a canvas for signaling and identity in various species. When you notice a blush on your cheeks or a goosebump on your arm, you're witnessing ancient responses no longer serving their original purposes perfectly, but still woven into the fabric of your physiology. Our senses are another catalog of evolutionary ingenuity. Light-sensitive patches probably began as molecules that changed shape in response to photons, simple detectors that could tell light from dark. From such humble beginnings emerged lenses and retinas sophisticated enough to perceive depth, color, and motion. Hearing started with the detection of vibrations. In vertebrates, those mechanical signals were funneled and amplified by ear structures that eventually included tiny bones in the middle ear. Smell and taste rely on molecular recognition, receptors matching chemicals like keys into locks.
touch evolved an array of receptors tuned to pressure, temperature, and even gentle, affective touch, the slow, pleasant fibers that carry the sensation of a caress and play a role in social bonding. There is a peculiar intimacy in the way these systems intersect. Think of the smell of baking bread and the sudden memory of your grandmother's kitchen. That link is not sentimental fiction, but a consequence of anatomic proximity, olfactory circuits wired into limbic areas of the brain associated with memory and emotion. The nervous system's layout is not the product of a plan, but of layered additions over time, early circuits repurposed or wrapped into newer networks. The result is a brain that is not the clean product of a single blueprint, but a palimpsest, where old handwriting still shows beneath newer ink. And there are trade-offs. Our upright posture allows us to see over tall grass and to free our hands for carrying and manipulating objects. But walking on two legs requires a reshaped pelvis and an S-shaped spine to balance the upper body. Those changes narrowed the birth canal in mammals with large brains, creating a tension between locomotion and childbirth that has shaped human life in profound ways. Pain in the lower back, difficult childbirth, arthritis in knees, these are not maladies caused by failure, but the predictable consequences of evolutionary compromise. Your body is brilliant, yes, but it's also economical and improvisational. It favors solutions that work well enough, quickly, and often repeatedly. At this point, a small, amusing thought. Sooner or later, in every long human life, we stub a toe, and the outrage of that instant is a reminder that even minor parts of our anatomy carry the ghost of long histories. Toes were once useful for grasping and for balance in trees.
Our ancestors who became bipedal reshaped foot bones for walking, not for clinging. The pain is immediate, the evolutionary explanation is slow and patient. As we move through these tales, do keep the motif in mind. You are a walking fossil, not as a static museum piece, but as a living record. Everything from the hairs on your arms to the microscopic inhabitants of your gut is a chapter. Speaking of which, don't imagine your body as a single organism. It's an ecosystem. Your gut hosts trillions of microbes, bacteria, archaea, and fungi that aid digestion, help synthesize vitamins, and interact with your immune and nervous systems. The gut microbiome has co-evolved with us. Our diets, lifestyles, and environments shape its composition, and in turn it affects aspects of our physiology. We're still learning the specifics, and current evidence suggests complex, context-dependent relationships rather than simple cause and effect rules. It's a reminder that bodies are networks of relationships, both internal and external. Slowly now, feel the rise and fall of breath again. The oxygen that feeds your mitochondria wasn't always abundant in the atmosphere. About 500 million years ago, the Great Oxygenation Event, or more broadly, the gradual oxygenation of Earth's atmosphere by photosynthesizing microbes, changed the rules of the game. Oxygen made large, energy-hungry bodies possible. It also changed chemistry at a planetary scale, creating new environmental challenges and opportunities. You, as an aerobic creature, owe your metabolic style to those microbes that learned to harness sunlight. As night deepens, imagine being small in a shallow pool, gill-breathing and scaled. The move from water to land is one of evolution's great tinkerings. Lungs are not entirely new inventions, but are derived from structures that could hold air in pockets. Some fish today still have swim bladders and lung-like organs that hint at these transitions. The change from gilled to lung-based respiration meant adjusting to a boundary where dryness and gravity demanded different strategies for support and moisture retention. Lungs, coupled with a circulatory system that could efficiently move oxygenated blood to tissues, allowed vertebrates to explore terrestrial habitats successfully. All these changes, body plans, skeletons, lungs, skin, senses, hands, and brains, are stitched together by selection acting on variation. No foresight, no plan, just repeated generations where certain forms happen to survive and reproduce more effectively in particular contexts. The result is a rich patchwork. It is useful, elegant, messy, and occasionally hilarious in all its juts and compromises. Your appendix, if you still have it, is a small example. Possibly once useful for digesting certain diets, now mostly an evolutionary leftover for most people, though it might retain immune-related roles, a footnote in your gut's biography.
There's a quiet drama in the interplay between anatomy and culture. Once our hands could fashion tools, we entered a feedback loop. Tools changed behavior, behavior shaped selection pressures, selection nudged anatomy and cognition, cognition enabled more complex tools. Fire control and cooking are part of that story too. By making foods more digestible, cooking may have altered jaw size and digestive tract demands, and perhaps even supported larger brains. These are plausible scenarios, supported by converging strands of evidence, though specifics remain a matter of ongoing research and debate. Where certainty is low, scientists rightly hedge, and in that humility lies a kind of comfort. Science is an unfolding conversation, not a settled liturgy. Now imagine a small, close-knit group around a hearth, hands passing down pots, voices carrying stories, faces lit by flame. Social life left its fingerprints on our bodies. Muscles of the face evolved for nuanced expressions, the white of the eyes helped signal gaze direction, and vocal anatomy adapted to produce a wider range of sounds. Hormonal systems, including oxytocin, encourage bonding and trust. Language and cooperation are part cultural, part biological. They arose from extended periods of selection where cooperation had payoffs in survival and reproduction. We could pause here, and it would be tempting to end on a tidy note. Marvel at the body, be grateful, sleep. But the story is not yet fully told. There are more pages, more turns, more compromises and innovations to gently unpack. The spine's full architecture, the limb transitions from fin to hand, the emergence of the mammalian neocortex, and the ways culture and biology entwine. These are stories that begin in deep time and arrive now in the small sensations of your body, the ache that nags in the morning, the quickening pulse when you laugh, the way certain smells can make you breathe differently. Slowly now, move one hand to rest where your spine meets your pelvis. Feel the subtle angle of your hips. Feel the way balance is achieved by a complex interaction of bone shapes, muscle tone, and nervous feedback. The vertebral column is not simply a stack of bones. Between each vertebra sit discs that cushion impacts and allow flexibility. Ligaments and muscles thread through the whole structure, stabilizing and mobilizing. The network that protects your spinal cord is an evolutionary masterpiece of compromise, strong enough to bear weight and protect delicate neural tissue, yet flexible enough to bend and twist. And beyond protection, the spine is a conduit for adaptation, as some lineages shifted from water to land, as forelimbs became specialized for grasping and hind limbs for propulsion, spinal curvature adapted along with the rest of the body. Our modern S-shaped spine is a solution to balancing an upright torso above a bipedal pelvis.
That uprightness supports bipedal locomotion, but also concentrates loads in certain regions, which explains why back pain is such a common human complaint. It is not a sign of poor design, but the necessary cost of a lifestyle that favors ambulation and hand use. Keep your attention there for a moment, and let your thoughts drift to that ancient shallow pool again. Imagine the evolution of a limb, a gradual elongation and stiffening of fin elements, a shift in muscle attachments, a reconfiguration of joint mechanics that allowed weight to be supported out of water. Those incremental changes, each small and plausible, accumulated into a structure capable of bearing weight on land. There is a quiet thrill in recognizing that the bones in your arm mirror those in a Devonian fish's fin in a way that betrays common ancestry. It is a reminder that deep time is not remote. It is built into the shape and function of your body right now. We'll linger on the limb-to-hand transition and on how tool use rewired brain circuits, and we'll trace more of the brain's evolution from diffused nerve nets to the layered plastic organ perched in your skull. But for now, breathe and let the sense of continuity settle. Your body is a collection of stories, some pragmatic, some elegant, all part of a long experiment on a small blue planet. There will be more to tell about hands and brains and the peculiar vulnerabilities that come with being human, the compromises that produce both genius and fragility. And as we turn the next page, we'll meet the fossils and living animals that let us reconstruct those tales, like breadcrumbs leading back through time. Slowly now, let your attention fall to your hands. Place them to rest where they will be for the next few minutes. Soft, warm, perhaps a little restless after a day of typing or washing up. Imagine for a moment the shallow waters of the Devonian again, where little fins first started to stiffen into something that could prop a body up. That same pattern of bones, one bone, two bones, many, repeats itself in your upper arm, forearm, and wrist. It is a pattern older than forests, older than most fossils you might have on a shelf. It is a pattern written into the blueprint of tetrapod limbs.
A hand is an extraordinary assembly of levers and pulleys, a collaboration of bones, tendons, muscles, and nerves. There are long bones for strength, many small joints for nuance, and bursae and sheaths that guide tendons along their paths. Evolution tinkered with what was already there, elongating some elements, shrinking others, rerouting muscles and nerves. The opposable thumb, that small, audacious digit, is the product of subtle shifts in bone orientation and tendon placement. It allows a precision grip, pinching between thumb and fingers, and a power grip, closing the whole hand around an object. These two kinds of grip open very different worlds, one for delicacy, one for force.
When you pick up a mug, your brain coordinates dozens of muscles in a fraction of a second. That dexterity is not just anatomical, it's neurological. Regions of the brain in your sensory motor cortex map the hand with exaggerated real estate, a kind of cartography where fingers and thumb occupy more cortical territory than, say, your elbow. This cortical magnification is a record of use. The more a body part is used for fine control, the more of the brain dedicates space to it. Over generations, increased manual skill fed back onto selection pressures. Over decades and centuries, cultural practices like toolmaking, sewing, carving, and writing reshaped how hands were used, and thus subtly shaped the social and developmental contexts that select for particular skills. Tools changed the rules. When early humans discovered that a rock could be shaped to cut or a stick to probe, those behaviors had ripple effects. Cooked food, for instance, is easier to chew and digest. If ancestors regularly consumed cooked food, that could reduce the selection for large jaws and teeth, and could alter energy allocation across the body. It's a plausible link, supported by a patchwork of evidence, not a neat before and after rule. The important point is that culture and anatomy entered into conversation. Behaviors became selection pressures, and selection, in turn, shaped the bodies that enacted those behaviors. If you trace the pathway from finger to thought, you arrive at the brain. Brains began, in evolutionary terms, as decentralized networks, nerve nets that could sense the environment and coordinate simple responses. As animals focused on directed movement, nervous tissue gathered at the front of the body, creating concentrations of neurons that could process sensory inputs more effectively. That trend, cephalization, paved the way for more complex neural architectures, dorsal nerve cords and chordates, ganglia that organized responses, and eventually a forebrain that could integrate information in more flexible ways. Your brain is a layered palimpsest. Beneath the smooth furrow of surface lie systems that were added at different times and for different reasons. The limbic system, often invoked for emotion and memory, sits at the heart of this arrangement, older than the cortex and specialized for rapid evaluation of threats and rewards. Later, the neocortex expanded, especially in mammals and even more in primates and hominins, enabling pattern recognition, abstraction, and flexible problem-solving. Neurons communicate across synapses using electrical impulses and chemical messengers. Those synaptic connections strengthen and weaken through experience in a process called plasticity. Your ability to learn a new skill, to remember a face, to recognize a melody, rests on this ever-changing pattern of connections. It is tempting to think of the brain as a single elegant machine built all at once.
The reality is messier and perhaps more charming. Older circuits were repurposed, layered, and sometimes left intact beneath newer functions. That legacy explains why smells can so easily conjure memories, or why sudden sounds can make the heart flutter before the mind has time to frame them. The architecture is both efficient and opportunistic, capable of astonishing feats and subject to peculiar quirks. There are costs to the very things that make human cognition exceptional. Brains are expensive. They consume a lot of energy relative to their mass. Some evolutionary accounts propose trade-offs where energy invested in a larger brain must come at the expense of other systems, unless offset by changes in diet, behavior, or social structure. Cooking, cooperative foraging, division of labor, and parental provisioning are all ways that social life might have helped support bigger brains. These are plausible connections rather than iron laws. They are supported by comparative anatomy, isotope chemistry, and archaeological evidence that, taken together, form a converging narrative. Turn your attention now to the corridor that runs from mouth to anus, the digestive tract. It is an elegant tube, one of the oldest forms of organization in animals. Simple animals rely on a single opening to ingest and expel, but as organisms grew more complex, a through-gut, separate mouth and exit, allowed a directional flow of food and more specialized compartments. Stomachs evolved as chambers for chemical breakdown. Intestines lengthened to extract nutrients. Enzymes and acids worked together with muscular contractions to grind, churn, and move food along.
Your gut does not work alone. It hosts a teeming ecosystem of microorganisms, bacteria, archaea, fungi, viruses, collectively known as the gut microbiome. These tiny residents assist with digestion, help synthesize vitamins, and interact with the immune system. They also produce metabolites that can influence mood and metabolism. Crucially, the composition of the microbiome is shaped by diet, environment, antibiotics, and early life exposures. It is coevolution in action. Rather than a simplistic good versus bad model, current work emphasizes a dynamic balance in which context matters. The microbiome is not a single organ, but a community with its own internal ecology, responsive to shifts in the host's life. The gut-brain axis is a headline-grabbing concept because it links digestion and emotion in a poetic, sometimes accurate way. Vagus nerve pathways, immune signaling, and microbial metabolites are all routes by which the gut can influence neural states. Yet this does not mean the gut dictates mood in a deterministic sense. It is better thought of as a conversation. Signals travel both ways, and the balance is nuanced. Bipedalism, the habit of walking on two legs, deserves a slow appreciation.
It reshaped the skeleton in profound ways. The foramen magnum shifted under the skull so the head balanced on top of the spine. The pelvis became shorter and broader to support upright posture. The femur angled inward to place feet under the center of gravity. The foot developed arches for shock absorption and spring. These changes freed the hands for carrying and manipulation, opening the door to tool culture, but they also introduced constraints. One of those constraints is the so-called obstetric trade-off. As hominin brains expanded, the neonatal skull grew larger. Meanwhile, the demands of bipedalism narrowed the birth canal. Various hypotheses have been proposed, sometimes called the obstetric dilemma, to explain how different selective pressures balanced out to produce the reproductive and skeletal patterns we observe. It is a plausible explanation for some aspects of birthing difficulty, but scientists debate the extent and nuances of that trade-off. What is clearer is that childbirth in humans involves a complex choreography between mother and infant, involving pelvic shape, fetal orientation, and social support systems that cushion the risks. The social scaffolding, midwifery, cooperative care, cultural knowledge, has and remains a crucial part of human reproductive success. Aging and senescence are also records of evolutionary compromise. Natural selection is strongest on traits that affect reproduction and survival up to and through the reproductive window. Traits that manifest only late in life experience weaker selection. This can lead to the accumulation of late-acting deleterious changes. There are several frameworks to think about aging. Antagonistic pleiotropy suggests that genes beneficial early in life may have adverse effects later. The dispensable soma theory proposes a balance in energy allocation between reproduction and maintenance. Cellular processes such as telomere shortening, oxidative damage, and the buildup of senescent cells contribute mechanistically to aging. Yet the patterns of aging differ widely across species, reminding us that longevity is not fixed but shaped by life history strategies. Now picture faces in a dimly lit room, voices rising and falling around a fire. Faces are an evolutionary display board. Muscles under the skin can sculpt a face into countless expressions, providing cues for emotion, intention, and identity. The white of the human eye, the sclera, is relatively conspicuous compared with many other primates, and that conspicuousness can make shifts in gaze easier to detect. That small, subtle change may have played a role in cooperative signaling, where knowing where someone else is looking can be socially useful. Voice, too, is a biological instrument shaped by anatomy and culture. The size and shape of the vocal tract, the larynx, and the fine control of breathing and articulation co-evolved with social uses of communication. Language is an extraordinary blend of biology and culture. Anatomical capabilities set the stage, but cultural invention filled in the choreography. Touch is perhaps the most intimate of the senses. There are specialized nerve fibers, some tuned to rapid, discriminative touch, others to slow, pleasant stroking, that carry different qualities of tactile information. The slow, affective touch fibers are implicated in social bonding. Think of the calming effect of a hand on a shoulder or a gentle stroke that eases tension. Oxytocin, sometimes dubbed a bonding hormone, is often released in contexts of social contact and can modulate affiliation. But hormones are modulators, not simplistic switches. Hormonal systems are complex and context-sensitive. Oxytocin can promote trust in some settings and heightened vigilance in others. The message is the same that runs through this whole story. Biological mechanisms interact with social contexts in ways that are rich, contingent, and sometimes surprising. Every innovation carries with it peculiar vulnerabilities. Our backs ache because of trading a horizontal quadrupedal posture for an upright one. Our wisdom teeth can become impacted because jaw size and tooth number changed at different rates. The lower back bears the brunt of loads because of the way weight is transmitted through an S-shaped spine. Immune systems that are adept at defending against pathogens can sometimes misfire, creating allergies or autoimmunity, another instance of systems that generally serve survival but occasionally err. These are not failures as much as signatures of a process that favors workable solutions over perfection. It is worth pausing on a small, everyday marvel: sleep. Sleep is not a failure of function. It is a deeply conserved state across many animals, serving functions in memory consolidation, metabolic regulation, and neural maintenance. The patterns of sleep, REM and non-REM cycles, slow-wave sleep, vary across species, reflecting life histories and ecological pressures. Your need for sleep and the particular architecture of it is the product of trade-offs shaped over millions of nights, balancing vigilance and restoration. As you listen in the quiet of your room, consider the microscopic tens of billions of cells that share your body with you. Immune cells patrol borders, skin cells slough off, stem cells lie in niches ready to repair tissue. Microbes in your gut and on your skin participate in a constant dynamic exchange. The body is simultaneously individual and communal, personal and ecological. That doubling is part comfort, part humility. You are yourself and an assemblage of histories and relationships. Our species' capacity for cooperation and culture has altered the landscape of selection. Cooperative child-rearing, language, narrative, and institutions allow the transmission of knowledge across generations, reducing the extent to which each individual must discover everything anew.
Culture can speed up adaptive responses beyond genetic change. Technologies, from clothing to shelter to medicine, allow humans to survive in environments that would otherwise be hostile. That cultural buffering can obscure the raw signature of selection, but it is itself an evolved human strategy, a set of behavioral adaptations that reshape fitness landscapes. As the planet changed, volcanoes, ice ages, shifts in sea level, lineages moved, adapted, sometimes vanished. The tapestry of life is woven from persistence, extinction, and innovation. Consider oxygen once more. It was the product of tiny organisms harnessing sunlight, and their metabolic byproduct transformed the world, enabling larger and more energy-demanding bodies. It is a striking cosmic echo that starlight, captured by photosynthesis, is part of the chain leading to your very breath. There is a particular kind of comfort in recognizing that imperfections in our bodies are traces of solutions that have worked well enough to carry life forward. Back pain, dimples, varied skin tones, different gut microbiomes, laughter lines, each has an ancestry and context. The story of evolution is not one of progress in a straight line, but a branching narrative of fit, imperfect solutions sculpted by environmental contexts and historical constraints. Before we close, settle again into the slow rise and fall of breathing. Feel the small rhythmic work of your rib cage and diaphragm. Consider the heart beneath your hand, if your hand is resting there, the constant, patient pump tuned over evolutionary time to meet the changing demands of activity and rest. Think of the eyes that have adjusted to countless light levels, of ears that detect whispers, of fingers that can thread a needle or tap a rhythm on a table. These are not merely instruments. They are the accumulated handiwork of deep time, shaped by selection and circumstance. If you have enjoyed this quiet journey through bodies and deep time, a short, gentle gesture helps these slow voyages continue. If you like drifting off to the sound of science, a like and a subscribe keeps the sleepy scientist making more of them. A final soft reflection. Cosmology and biology are not distant cousins. They are chapters of the same story. Stars forged the heavy elements that became the bones, proteins, and hemoglobin in your blood. Microbial alchemy reshaped the atmosphere, enabling aerobic metabolism. Plate tectonics, climate swings, and fluctuating seas provided the stage on which life improvised. When you look at your hands, your spine, your breath, you are holding a fragment of a cosmic narrative that stretches back billions of years.
Rest now with that sense of belonging to an enormous, slow story. Your body is not a problem to be fixed, but a continuously edited manuscript, full of marginal notes, corrections, and beautiful, practical compromises.
Tomorrow, it will carry you again through small tasks and perhaps new delights. Tonight, it deserves quiet appreciation. If tonight's slow trip through deep time felt soothing, subscribe and join us next time for another soft expedition into science. Good night and rest well. Your body is a story worth marveling at.